found him lying there for 4 days. No doctor, no help, just pain. TV legend Gene Barry, the star millions adored in Bat Masterson, had fallen and hit his head so hard his brain was bleeding. But nobody at the fancy nursing home even bothered to call 911. By the time they finally did something, it was too late. The shocking truth about his final days is just the beginning of a Hollywood horror story nobody saw coming. Gene Barry was born Eugene Class on June 14, 1919, in Manhattan, New York City. His parents, Martin Class and Eva Kahn, were Russian Jewish immigrants who had a deep love for music. Martin worked as a jeweler, but his real passion was the violin. Eva was an amateur singer who filled their home with melodies. Their influence shaped Eugene's early years, giving him a strong foundation in music. He grew up in Brooklyn at 1446 59th Street, surrounded by a mix of cultures that exposed him to different artistic influences. Life wasn't easy, especially during the Great Depression. Money was tight, but his parents always encouraged his talent. They believed that no matter how difficult things got, their son's gift for music was worth nurturing. By the time he attended New Utrecht High School, Eugene had already developed into a skilled violinist. His father's passion for the instrument had inspired him, and he dreamed of a career in classical music. But everything changed during a high school football game. A serious arm injury shattered his hopes of becoming a professional violinist. The accident was devastating. Music had always been his life, and now the one thing he had worked for was suddenly out of reach. Instead of giving up, he turned his focus to something else: his voice. Singing had always been a part of his life, but now it became his main passion. He discovered that he had an impressive baritone voice, strong enough to open new doors. At just 17 years old, he won a scholarship to the Chatham Square School of Music, awarded by David Sarnoff, the head of RCA. It was a life-changing moment. The scholarship gave him formal training, helping him refine his talent and prepare for bigger opportunities. For 2 years, he studied vocal techniques and music theory while performing at nightclubs and on radio shows. He took any job he could find to support himself. Some gigs lasted, others didn't. He once got fired from a nightclub job after just a week, but he never let rejection stop him. He won a talent contest on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, which gave him more exposure. Slowly, he was building a name for himself. Around this time, he made an important decision. He needed a name that suited his ambitions. Inspired by actor John Barrymore, he chose the name Gene Barry. It wasn't just a change of identity. It was a declaration of who he wanted to be, a performer who could command attention on any stage. His determination paid off when he landed roles in Broadway productions like New Moon in 1942. He was just 23 years old when he took on the role of Captain Paul Duval in the revival of Sigmund Romberg's operetta. For a young actor from Brooklyn, this was a major breakthrough. Born Eugene Class, Barry had spent years training his voice at the Chatham Square School of Music. His scholarship had given him the chance to refine his talent, and before stepping onto the Broadway stage, he had already performed in semi-staged operettas at Carnegie Hall. The New Moon was a story filled with romance and political intrigue set in 18th-century New Orleans. It was the perfect production for Barry to showcase his skills. His commanding presence and strong voice caught the attention of both audiences and critics. That year, he was honored with the Theatre World Award, a prestigious recognition for outstanding Broadway debuts. This success convinced him to take on a new identity as a performer. Inspired by his idol John Barrymore, he changed his name to Gene Barry. 2 years later, in 1944, he joined the cast of Catherine Was Great, a Broadway production led by the legendary Mae West. He played Lieutenant Bunin, but the most important part of this experience wasn't the role. It was meeting Betty Kelb. She was a chorus girl performing under the stage name Julie Carson. During rehearsals, Barry and Betty formed a connection that quickly turned into something deeper. Their love story wasn't without drama. Mae West, known for controlling every detail of her productions, reportedly did not want another blonde on stage. Betty had been wearing a dark wig to hide her natural blonde hair, but when West found out, she was fired before opening night. That moment could have been a setback, but instead, it became the start of something far more meaningful. Barry and Betty continued their relationship, and on October 22nd, 1944, they got married. Their marriage lasted for nearly 60 years, a rare achievement in show business. They had two biological sons, Michael in 1946 and Frederick in 1953, then adopted a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1967. While Betty's time in the theater was brief, she became the foundation of Barry's career, supporting him as he moved from Broadway to Hollywood. Despite the success of The New Moon and the exposure from Catherine Was Great, Barry struggled to gain recognition on Broadway. He took roles in productions like Rosalinda, an adaptation of Die Fledermaus, and Molière's The Would-Be Gentleman, but these performances did little to elevate his status. Even though Rosalinda ran for 2 years, his role as Falk didn't bring the breakthrough he had hoped for. At times, work was so scarce that Barry had to take jobs outside the theater to support himself. In 1944, after leaving Catherine Was Great, he found himself unemployed. He took whatever work he could find, including selling jewelry. It was a frustrating time, but he refused to give up. His turning point came when Hollywood took notice. In 1951, Barry appeared on Hollywood Screen Test, a program designed to showcase new talent. It caught the attention of Paramount Pictures, which signed him to a contract. At the time, television was starting to reshape Hollywood, and Barry was part of that shift. His early years at Paramount were promising, but the roles weren't always ideal. He found himself cast in B-movies, but even in smaller films, his natural charisma stood out. His big screen debut came in The Atomic City, 1952, a Cold War thriller where he played Dr. Frank Addison, a nuclear physicist whose son is kidnapped by foreign spies. The film was shot in Los Alamos, New Mexico, a classified government site at the time. That kind of access was rare, making the movie feel realistic in a way that few had before. It earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Writing, and Barry's performance helped establish him as a capable leading man. His career was building momentum, and the following year brought an even bigger opportunity. In 1953, he starred in The War of the Worlds, a sci-fi epic that became a defining moment in his career. The film, directed by Byron Haskin and produced by George Pal, took H.G. Wells's classic novel and reimagined it in 1950s California. Barry played Dr. Clayton Forrester, a scientist caught in the middle of an alien invasion. The movie's special effects were groundbreaking, earning an Academy Award, and its themes of survival and scientific discovery resonated with audiences at a time when Cold War fears were growing. Barry's performance struck the right balance: calm, intelligent, and determined. He became the face of one of the most iconic sci-fi films of the era, cementing his status as a Hollywood leading man. By 1955, he was working alongside some of the biggest stars in the industry. In Soldier of Fortune, he appeared with Clark Gable and Susan Hayward in a Cold War adventure set in Hong Kong. Barry played Louis Hoyt, a journalist imprisoned in communist China on espionage charges. His character's capture drives much of the film's plot, as Hayward's character fights to free him with the help of Gable's smuggler-turned-hero. While Gable dominated the screen, Barry's performance gave weight to the story, proving he could hold his own alongside Hollywood legends. The film was ambitious. Gable filmed on location in Hong Kong, adding realism, while Hayward's scenes were shot on studio backlots. For Barry, it was a chance to expand his acting range, but Hollywood still saw him a certain way. That became a challenge for him. He had the looks, the charm, and the presence of a classic leading man. But that also meant he kept getting the same kinds of roles. In Red Garters, 1954, he played a polished cowboy in a musical western. Barry later admitted that he wished he had been offered different kinds of roles. He wanted to play fathers, grandfathers, and more everyday characters instead of always being cast as the elegant gentleman. Gene Barry's Bat Masterson brought something fresh to television when it premiered on NBC in 1958. Westerns were everywhere at the time, but this show had a different kind of hero. Instead of a rough and rugged cowboy, Barry played a lawman who was smooth, sharp, and always in control. He wore a pinstriped suit, a black derby hat, and carried a gold-tipped cane that wasn't just for style. He could use it as a weapon when needed, though he preferred to settle conflicts with his wit instead of his fists. The show ran for 3 seasons, airing 107 half-hour episodes between October 8, 1958, and June 1, 1961. It was inspired by the real William Barclay Bat Masterson, a lawman, gambler, and journalist from the Old West. The real Masterson was known for his sharp dressing and carried a cane he had been given by the people of Dodge City while serving as sheriff. The show took these details and shaped them into something larger than life. Barry's Masterson was a man of charm and intelligence, standing out in a genre filled with hardened gunslingers. From the very first episode, Bat Masterson captured audiences. The opening theme song, The Ballad of Bat Masterson, performed by Bill Lee, set the stage for a Western hero unlike any other. Instead of staying in one place, Masterson traveled from town to town, helping those in trouble. He had a knack for getting out of dangerous situations without resorting to violence, which gave the show a lighter, more playful tone compared to other westerns of the time. Critics and viewers loved it. Gene Barry's performance brought energy and humor to the role, making Masterson a character that people remembered long after the show ended. His ability to deliver sharp dialogue with confidence gave the show a theatrical quality that set it apart from the rest. In 1959, Barry was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Actor. The show itself also earned a nomination for Outstanding Editing. The success of Bat Masterson made Barry a major television star. Before landing the role, he had appeared in films like The Atomic City, 1952, but this was the role that truly defined his career. By the late 1950s, Westerns dominated television. Shows like Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, and Rawhide were among the most popular of the time. Bat Masterson found its own place by offering something different. Instead of another brooding, gun-slinging cowboy, audiences got a Western hero who relied on intelligence and charm. Merchandise featuring Barry's likeness quickly followed. Comic books, toys, and other collectibles became popular among young fans. Even after the show ended in 1961, reruns kept it alive, bringing new viewers into the world of Bat Masterson for years to come. Years after Bat Masterson went off the air, Gene Barry returned to the role. In 1990, he appeared as an older Bat Masterson in an episode of Guns of Paradise titled A Gathering of Guns. The episode brought together classic TV lawmen, including Hugh O'Brien as Wyatt Earp. The following year, Barry reprised the role again in The Gambler Returns, The Luck of the Draw. This made-for-TV movie, released in 1991, featured famous Western characters from television history. It was a celebration of the genre's legacy, and Barry's appearance reminded audiences why Masterson had been such a standout series. Gene Barry's career took a dramatic turn in 1963 when he became Amos Burke in Burke's Law. Before that, he was mostly known for playing a Western lawman, but this show changed everything. From 1963 to 1966, Barry played a millionaire detective who led the LAPD homicide division. It was an unusual concept. Amos Burke was incredibly wealthy, yet he chose to dedicate his life to solving crimes. His fortune, hinted to come from inheritance and smart investments, let him live in luxury while still chasing down criminals. The role suited Barry perfectly. His smooth, confident style made Burke both charismatic and authoritative. In 1965, his performance won him a Golden Globe for Best Actor. What made Burke's Law stand out was its mix of elegance, humor, and mystery. This was not a typical detective show. Burke wasn't a trench coat-wearing cop in a smoky office. He was a high society detective, at home in lavish settings, solving murders with charm and intelligence. Producer Aaron Spelling once said Barry was a man at home in a tuxedo, and that's exactly how he played Burke. The character became famous for his clever one-liners, known as Burke's Laws. Phrases like, "Never ask a question unless you already know the answer," became part of the show's signature style. The way Burke moved through his world made the show even more fascinating. He didn't just drive to crime scenes, he was chauffeured in a 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud II. This car wasn't just a flashy detail. It became an iconic part of the series, complete with an early version of a car phone, which was groundbreaking in the early 1960s. The contrast between his glamorous lifestyle and his serious detective work made Burke a unique character. He lived in a massive 19-room mansion, surrounded by luxury, yet he remained deeply committed to justice. Another element that set Burke's Law apart was its guest stars. The show regularly featured big-name celebrities, adding even more glamour to its murder cases. This approach influenced later series like Columbo and Murder, She Wrote, where famous guest stars became a major draw. The combination of mystery, elegance, and humor made Burke's Law a hit, but its influence didn't stop there. In 1994, nearly 30 years after the original series ended, CBS brought Burke's Law back. Gene Barry returned as Amos Burke, now promoted to deputy chief. This time, the show introduced a new twist. Burke had a son, Peter, played by Peter Barton, who worked alongside him. The revival kept many of the original show's elements, including the luxurious settings, sharp dialogue, and, of course, Burke's famous one-liners. It also featured guest stars from classic 1960s spy series like The Avengers and I Spy, which gave longtime fans a sense of nostalgia. Despite these efforts, the 1990s version never quite captured the magic of the original. Critics found it campier and less sophisticated, and younger audiences didn't connect with it the same way. One major change was Burke's backstory. In the revival, he was a widower who had raised his son with the help of his faithful chauffeur, Henry. This added more emotion to the character, but also took away some of the independent, high-society mystique that made the original so memorable. Gene Barry kept reinventing himself even as the entertainment industry changed. In 1968, he took on one of his most iconic roles as Glenn Howard in The Name of the Game, an ambitious NBC series that ran until 1971. The show had a unique format with 3 rotating leads, making it stand out from anything else on television at the time. It was also the most expensive show ever produced back then, with each 90-minute episode costing around $400,000. Barry played Glenn Howard, a powerful and sophisticated publishing tycoon who ran Howard Publications. He wasn't just a boss, he was actively involved in investigative work, often taking charge of high-stakes cases. His character oversaw two reporters, Jeff Dillon, played by Tony Franciosa, and Dan Farrell, played by Robert Stack, as they uncovered corruption and tackled issues like political scandals and environmental crimes. The show's first episode, A Fear of High Places, set the tone with a suspenseful political thriller. Barry's performance gave Glenn Howard the perfect mix of authority and charm, making him one of the standout characters in the series. Over 3 seasons and 76 episodes, The Name of the Game became a landmark in television history, paving the way for later anthology-style shows like The Bold Ones and NBC Mystery Movie. After years of success in television, Barry made a major return to Broadway in 1983 with La Cage aux Folles. He played Georges, a gay nightclub owner in Saint-Tropez, starring alongside George Hearn as Albin. The musical, based on a 1973 French play, was groundbreaking. It was the first major Broadway hit to focus on a homosexual relationship, bringing LGBTQ+ themes to mainstream audiences in a way that hadn't been done before. Barry's performance was heartfelt and nuanced. Instead of leaning into stereotypes, he portrayed Georges as a caring and devoted partner, emphasizing his love for his family. His work in the role earned him a Tony Award nomination for Best Actor in 1984. Even though he lost to his co-star Hearn, Barry considered La Cage aux Folles the highlight of his career. The production itself was a massive hit, running for over 4 years with 1,761 performances and winning 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. After his Broadway run, Barry continued with the touring production, performing in major cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Beyond television and Broadway, Barry also found joy in performing alongside his wife, Betty Claire Kalb. They shared the stage in several productions, including Fiddler on the Roof, where Barry played Teevee, and musicals like No, No, Nanette, and On a Clear Day, You Can See Forever. During the 1970s, when his on-screen career slowed down, their performances together became more frequent. They also worked in intimate cabaret shows, where Barry showcased his singing in solo performances like Gene Barry in One. His work with Betty wasn't just about keeping busy, it was a reflection of their strong bond. They were married for nearly 60 years, until Betty passed away in 2003.